So I want to talk a little bit about, admittedly, an extremely controversial subject, both inside the church and outside the church, whether you're in the nonprofit sector or the for-profit sector of business. And what that entails is how to voice a complaint, how to get the best out of your communication. Many people communicate, and they communicate abruptly or without intentionality. And when they do, they often get the results they prepared for, which is nothing. They didn't prepare at all for those conversations. And so when they go to get a result from those conversations, they're often lackluster and they have no advantage. So if you're in an institution or an organization or a for-profit business and you have to talk about something that is crucial, set it up for success. And I'm very keen on this idea of, if you want an expected outcome, communicate almost from the beginning what that expected outcome should be or should entail. For instance, if you have something extremely touchy and it's going to cost you a great deal of emotional energy to deal with it, probably not walking up to somebody and say, "Hey, do you have a few seconds?" Well, a few seconds implies that basically you're going to ask me how I did my hair today or something beautiful like that, and I'm going to get along with it. If you have something very important, why don't you set it up for success? It should start with a text that says, "Hey, there's something important, but not dramatic, that I need to talk to you about. When you have 25 minutes or an hour, whatever it is, would you let me know? And I would like to call you and discuss this important issue." You automatically have set that conversation on a successful trajectory because you have communicated so many things right from the get-go, such as, "It's important, I don't want to do it kind of on the side as we're walking along, and I want it to be meaningful." So when you do that, you automatically get a chance to have a successful conversation. One of the struggles is with the amount of communication that someone may have. For instance, I have a lot of communications every day coming at me: phone calls, texts, emails. The emails are the favorite of mine because I can sit in bed at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning and I can just fire off emails. And I can put them on timers, and they get delivered the next day, staggered at 9:15, 9:30, so I don't get like 25 emails back. But if somebody calls me, my days are scheduled, and so the best way to reach me would be to text me and say, "Hey, I need to speak with you. At the first available opportunity, give me a call, or text me a convenient time where we can talk uninterrupted." If someone does that, 99% sure they're getting a call back that day, okay? But a lot of times when the phone is ringing, I'm in the middle of a meeting, the phone is off, and so you have all of this communication that's just coming at you every day. Now, when you want something and you want attention, you've got to build the building blocks for success right from the get-go, okay? And that oftentimes is not just randomly in lurches and spurts, see if we can get someone to answer. Text or tell them, "Hey, do you think Tuesday morning," if you're face-to-face with them, "Tuesday morning, I know we're running here and we got this to do, but if I called you, would that be a good time for us to talk uninterrupted? So automatically, that's going to be a better setting than when you're sitting around at dinner and you're trying to have a bit of family time, and somebody says, "Hey, let me ask you about the decision that you made last week, and why did you let this person go?" Immediately, it's invasive, it's inopportune, and you're going to just say, "Why now? I don't understand that," right? So what you want to do right from the get-go, if you have dissent or you have a logical complaint that's not just born out of gripe, but it's constructive criticism, whoever you're trying to talk to about that, set it up in the most successful way you can by saying, "Look, I have something I need to ask you. I know this is how I would address a superior of mine. I know you're busy, but there is kind of something that I see going on, or an area of opportunity that we're missing, or there's a chance that we could recover some of our loss, or whatever you want to do, increase your shipping. I don't know, you fill in the blank." But by doing that, it seems less of a on attack mode. This is very important. So there was an article I read not long ago about upward dissent. How do I properly get my voice heard in an organization or an institution where typically I, at this level, don't get a chance to weigh in on this? Now, you can always do it in the griping, miserable way of, I was thinking, we don't do this enough and we don't do that. You're immediately getting somebody to resist the idea, right? Because it's on attack mode. It's aggressive, and it just doesn't work oftentimes, especially within a lot of strong personality leadership models and that. So communication is so important, and you can't go along with just groupthink, right? You can't just fall into the place where you say, "Well, everybody says it's going good, so it's going good." There is a huge danger in groupthink. You have to learn, how do I separate myself from the pack and make myself heard in a real and substantive way? So when you're dealing with groupthink, there's some certain issues to it. One is, why do teams, organizations, nonprofits or for-profits, why do they develop groupthink? Well, obviously, groupthink can be established by the doctrinal importance, and when doctrine is laid in, then there is a mandated groupthink, and one must adhere to that social construct that is abiding by that doctrine. However, there are some less than godly ways or means whereby an organization or a team engages in groupthink, and here's a few of them. One of the reasons that people do this is because of social cohesion, the desire for unity. A team unnaturally seeks cohesion and harmony to maintain supposed positive relationships. And the other challenge is that many organizations are conflict avoiders. And in avoiding conflict, group members may suppress dissenting opinions to avoid conflict and maintain a sense of unity. Okay? Here's another reason that dissent or groupthink, dissent is discouraged and groupthink is encouraged, is leadership influence. Strong leadership requires that one goes along with the vision, or they're very, very intentional when they go to express what it is that they feel like needs to change. Now, organizations or those who engage in groupthink, a lot of times it's because of authoritarian leadership styles. It can stifle independent thinking, and it discourages dissent. Also, in a more toxic environment, the fear of reprisal. This is important because team members may fear negative consequences for expressing opposing views leading to conformity. Yeah, the social cost of me standing up and speaking out is not worth it to me. So they may engage because of that, groupthink. The other reason that groupthink is a strong thing within teams and organizations is the norms and expectations to conform. Teams develop these normative behaviors and expectations that influence individual behavior. And so what this is called is conformity bias. Individuals may conform to group opinions to fit in and be accepted, even if it contradicts with their own personal convictions or their beliefs. So this is a real challenge that every single person who's involved in an organizational structure has to weigh out. Okay, so I have two more of these main points. Isolation from outside perspectives. This is another reason. Insular groups, teams that operate in isolation from external input, may lack diverse perspectives. Okay, it's called the echo chamber effect. Group members may reinforce their biases without exposure to alternative viewpoints. Okay, and what this does in groups and organizations that tend to operate and engage in groupthink is it transpires in a way where there is an overconfidence in their own estimation of the group's abilities. And this is the illusion of invulnerability. I mean, we see this all the time in the corporate world and in nonprofit church world, where leaders think they have so much power that the customer doesn't matter. I think the best example I can show you, and I'm doing this recording in December of 2023, and Walt Disney stock has plummeted in the last few months. And what their woke leftist agenda, they have lost. I think the other day it was recorded in the Wall Street Journal that they had lost $190 billion in market cap because of the repudiation of their followers. And so they're just completely out of touch with what their customers want. And so you can overestimate your power, your influence, and that causes an illusion of invulnerability. Group members may believe their decisions are infallible, leading to overconfidence. And we see this a lot in the nonprofit and church world. The papal edict, or as it's called by the Catholic Church, a papal bull. I love that. That's like the most wonderful name for it. But also what it does is groupthink leads to closed-mindedness. The group, it dismisses external input, assuming they possess all the necessary information. So the consequences of groupthink are dangerous, right? Because you begin to overestimate your own abilities, you underestimate the voice of others. Here's some other subsequent consequences of groupthink: poor decision making. Groupthink can result in suboptimal decisions due to the suppression of dissenting opinions. It may turn into lack of innovation. Conformity stifles creativity and innovative thinking, hindering progress. Another consequence of groupthink is missed opportunities. The failure to consider alternative perspectives may lead to missed opportunities and increased risk. Okay? Now, how as a leader do I try to kind of mitigate the consequences of groupthink? Well, if it's doctrinal, I'm not going to mitigate it. I want groupthink. Paul said we should all speak the same thing. Okay? So when it's in uniformity around the doctrine, we want a groupthink. But when it's in administration and operation and how we disseminate information, how we cast vision, how we implement goals and all of that, executing the programs, well, you don't want groupthink in that. So as a leader, I'm always thinking about how do we mitigate groupthink? How do I make people comfortable enough that when they have an idea, a concern, or a valid critique, how do they get to me? So one of the things is encouraging diverse perspectives. You create an environment where others' opinions are valued. You can promote constructive conflict, encourage healthy debate and constructive conflict resolution. You have to embrace this as a leader. The other thing is to seek external input, actively seek external perspectives to break the echo chamber effect. This is very, very important. Okay. Now, if you're not careful, what'll happen is you'll attempt to break through, and you'll do it in a way that's abusive or left-footed or obnoxious. And once you do that, it just boom, you're going to get shut down. Any leader worth their salt is not going to turn the table over to somebody who is just, a pessimist, or somebody who only sees what you're doing wrong, or they don't contribute in any meaningful way to what is done right. So you have to be extremely intentional when you're focusing on this stuff. And so if you have a dissenting opinion, which I think is healthy, because what you see even in the United States Supreme Court, you see a vote by majority. Here they are. But then not only do you realize that there are men and women on that bench that vote in dissent, they also write what is called dissenting opinions. And so it doesn't mean that it's a deal breaker, but it means I don't agree with this, and here's how I think it can be improved or better looked at. So the challenge is in organizations and in institutions is, how does one break from the pack of groupthink, and how does one begin to communicate their dissent in the right place? Okay? So this is important. All of us have opinions. All of us have questions. Every one of us have things that we question, things that we're concerned about, things that we don't understand. We may or may not agree with the validity of certain statements or whatever it is, okay? An elder taught me in my ministry that all of us have worrisome complaints or critiques. Play them out on minds and hearts that are stronger than you, not on weaker entities. So years ago, we saw in the movement an elder preacher who had serious considerations about his viewpoint on multiple things. And instead of him going to someone that was an elder or someone that even was a peer of his that had the same weathered, tempered, and tried kind of mental acuity, he would hold court with young preachers. And he would get them all together, and he would expose his convictional weaknesses to them. He would kind of extrapolate out what he believed was an issue and what he believed wasn't, what he thought was this, and opining ad nauseum to these younger preachers, which undermined their strong conviction and their belief. And in doing so, you could take that man and you could look in his wake, and in his wake is a massive amount of young preacher destruction behind him. Because what he was doing was he was playing out his dissenting opinions on unshaped, unformed, and untested minds and hearts. And that is the difference between someone who is weak and someone who is wicked. I am a weak man in some ways. In some things and views, I have weaknesses. You will not hear me getting 20-year-old preachers and sitting there and exacerbating out what it is that is my weakness. I'm not going to expansively opine about where I'm struggling. You know, when I have those days, Those days will be spent with Johnny King. Those days will be spent with Brother Nate Wilson or Brother Joel Holmes, or they'll be spent with Brother Larry Booker. I'm going to elders, and I'm going to talk to them. Now, on days where I am also seeking a peer review opinion, again, you're not going to find me down at the local restaurant with a bunch of 20-year-old preachers pouring out my dissenting views. You're going to hear me with people, sitting down with people like Nathan Holmes and Julian Ryder and Nathaniel Urshan and Caleb Adams and Miles Young and those that are around my age and those that have been tested and those men that are solid. That's where I'm going to offer that, okay? So that's the first thing I want to say is in order to set up for success, you don't do it publicly in front of a bunch of weak or unformed and untested minds, number one. Number two, you don't do it at inopportune times, right? You don't get Brother Booker in front of 25 teenage preachers and say, hey, let me ask you, is this really a heaven or hell issue? If you really, really want to pour your heart out, set it up for success and say, hey, there's a few things I want to talk to you. When you have 30 minutes or an hour or whatever you need, this is what I need, okay? So once you get those building blocks and foundational principles for successful communication in play, then the way that you want to do is express disagreement or dissent upward, not downward. You express it upward to management, supervisors. And granted, that's an intimidating exercise. Followers who take issues with decisions, policies, procedures lack the power to make the changes themselves, so they have no other way to express their opposition or their lack of ability to take action other than dissenting. Okay? Now, once they dissent, there's always the threat of retaliation. There's always the threat of saying, yeah, he's weak or he doesn't understand it or doesn't get it. So one of the things that you have to do in doing this is you have to let them know that, hey, I'm not trying to be a troublemaker. I'm not trying to undermine. I'm just trying to express some of my frustrations to management to do their organizations a valuable service, because dissent can alert the group to problems and help it operate more efficiently and ethically. Okay? So that's important, that you are doing it because you're trying to be a part of the solution, not a part of the problem. Okay? So according to the University of Arizona West Communication, Professor Jeffrey Cassing says satisfied workers who identify with their organizations are more likely to express upward dissent. Followers are also more likely to speak up if they, one, have relationships or higher status, two, believe that they can exert significant influence, three, have high-quality relationships with their supervisors. This is so incredibly important. If you don't think you have a relationship with the person that is in charge or the change agent, then you don't feel like you have a voice. So one of the most important things I can do as a pastor is to value the individuals, value their voices. Why? Because if I pastor here long enough, they are going to have dissenting opinions. If they do not believe that they have a high-quality relationship with me, what are they going to do when they're dissenting? They're going to go find some new one. They're going to find some faction. They're going to find some young person, and they're going to play that out. Why? Because they don't feel like they have a high-quality relationship with me. So it's extremely important that I work on establishing high-quality relations and individual value for every single member in our church. that they feel like when they do need to say something, okay, that I would be the one that they would want to say it. Now, one of the ways that you implement that is you make sure that you're not just knee-jerk reprisal every time someone says, "It's curious, why are we doing this?" or "Could we do this better?" Okay? So here's the important part of this. Don't ever think that offering solution is not welcome. Okay? So if I open my office door to everyone who saw a problem in this church, I'd have a line all the way down the hallway, and we would get nothing done but commiserate in our constructive criticism, but we would never grow. Okay? So the way in is to have a solution in hand. Okay? And so that is one of the surest ways to make sure that your participation is not seen as a fight, a critical spirit, or an argument, or a fault-finding spirit, but to say, hey, look, I have this solution for this problem that we're having. I am more willing to talk about any problem and solve for those problems if I know that there's a solution at hand and the person I'm talking to is actually the one that is working on that solution. The other thing you can't forget when you're working on upward dissent is gentle repetition. Repeatedly drawing attention to a topic, never a person, never an action, but a topic, okay, over a long period of time. Okay, it reminds those who are change agents about the certain issue, and it brings it back up over and over to their attention. I'm reminded of a story one time where Ronald Reagan had two men come in his office. One came in, talked to him, and he said, "Mr. Reagan, I'm here to support you. I'm here to feed you information. I'm here to help you. And I want to see you be able to affect great change for the American people." When he walked out, Ronald Reagan said, "Keep that guy near. Don't bring that guy back. Don't let him go far." Okay? The other guy right behind him comes in with the same style 3-ring binder, sits there, inundates the man, the president, with all kinds of facts and all kinds of information. And then when he goes to leave, he kind of insults in giving an underhanded compliment and says, "You know so much, I'm a little shocked that you don't know more about this subject, And so Mr. Reagan stops him and says, "Son, let me ask you a question. How long you been working on that 3-ring binder?" He said, months. And Mr. Reagan said, "And I knew last night when I sat down to look at today's schedule that I would meet you." He said, "Never undermine your own preparedness to make change by digging at the change agent who gives you an opportunity to make that change." So that's a very important lesson, okay? Don't just storm into your supervisor or your leader or pastor or whatever and just be like, "Well, this isn't on his radar." Right, it's on yours though, and if you come with the preparedness and you're talking to the change agent, view yourself as somebody who is sincerely in a position to help. Don't berate the person that you're trying to help. So that's an extreme situation, but it's important. So offering a solution along with drawing attention to the problem, okay? Write an email that includes some options or new procedures. When you're talking to that boss at work, don't just write an email that says the trash isn't taken out, and it's overflowing and blah, blah, blah. But write an email and offer a few solutions. Try to be involved in the process that creates the change as opposed to just being in the one that points it out. So here's a problem that other people don't understand. So in our church, we have teams, and each team has a team leader, okay? And so one of the ways that problems don't get fixed in this administration at Truth Church is when people assume that because I'm the pastor, they're allowed to gossip to me, And I constantly refer back to Matthew 18. Brother, sister, have you went and talked to this person one-on-one? No, I'm just coming to you. You're the pastor. Right, but there's not a scripture in the Bible that says, thou, pastor, art allowed to ignore the Bible, for thou art a pastor. Okay? I don't have this hall pass to gossip just because I'm the pastor. So I always defer back to the Bible in this sense and say, have you given them an opportunity to work this out one-on-one? And it's in private. And if they say no, well, then that's the next step. So one of the ways that we can encourage upward descent is to not try to go around everyone's head every time there's a problem, okay? And so, like, for instance, you have a team that's doing something in our church and some other team, whatever it is. I don't want to say it because people are like, oh, there's a problem in the church about these teams. So I got to be very diplomatic here. One team leader's having a problem and there's another team that's doing something else. And so immediately their response may be, I'm going to go tell pastor. And I ask, well, have you talked to their team leader? No, I'm coming to you. Okay, that's great. But why don't you give their team leader a chance to do it? Because this circumvention is kind of like it's not the nuclear option, but it's certainly the incendiary option, okay? Dissenting to someone above the immediate supervisor, talking to the boss's boss when that happens is not the first thing you want to do. If you really want to be a part of upward descent or getting your voice heard, don't in-route everybody every time. Don't just take off and say, okay, I'm going to pastor. But go to the leader, go to the team leader and say, look, can we work this out? And then, in the ultimate descent is resignation or, quitting. Threatening to resign in order to get the supervisor or manager to act is probably not going to make you the most heard person. There have been a few times when it takes a stand off to where you can say, look, I'm serious enough about this that if this is not dealt with, then I'm going to tender my resignation. Now, here's the difference in how that my opinion is that this needs to be done, is not to say, look, if this doesn't happen, A, B, or C, I'm going to resign. The thing is you may need to offer that option if it is not looked at or dealt with. If it continues and persists in being ignored or not communicated about, I have no choice but to quit this job because I'm not going to work in a hostile work environment. You may have to take that option. But the reality is that's not going to make you somebody who is able to provide substantive change in the long term in an organization. So we want to push against groupthink, but we don't want to create a bunch of rogue, independent, freewheeling cowboys that say, well, I'm not in groupthink, therefore I don't have to unify. Around doctrinal issues, we do want groupthink. Around things that need constructive criticism, we need Christians that are godly, honest, and wise in how to get their upward descent heard. God can use you. God can let you see things that the leader may never see, okay? Because he may never be on that bus. He may never be walking down there by that piece of grass and see the fallen tree that's back in the woods. And so all of these things that you are a part of, if it's a problem on the building, if it's an issue in administration, whatever it is, learn to effectively, humbly, and successfully get your voice heard. And in that, we're going to have better churches and better institutions. Thanks for thinking about groupthink and how to break out of it and maintain a Christian attitude.